Good morning. My name is Grant King, and a few days ago I came across a video by a Scottish gentleman named Brian Halliday, who I guess in his earlier career had been a stage hypnotist. He'd also spent time in the advertising business. I'm not sure of all of his credentials, but I posted this video because he explained in it how the very techniques that he used to do in his stage hypnosis shows and presentations were the exact same tactics that our leaders have been using to get us to fall for the COVID propaganda. Now, one of the things is I found the video very fascinating, but a little bit problematic because it's fairly long. It's about 45 minutes long. And he speaks in a rather halting Scottish accent, which is sometimes kind of hard to follow. So I thought I would make a video to would kind of cover the same points, a little bit shorter and be a little bit more to the point. But I'm also going to link the original video into the comments, providing it hasn't been taken down. I was able to look at it last night. So hopefully it's still there, but I'll try to post the link in the comments in case you'd like to actually see the video. Now, I'm going to cover some of the same information he had, but I also want to relate an experience that my son and I had about 15 years ago when we went to the South Florida Fair and saw the comedian hypnotist Tyson. And now, first of all, just to set it up, when we got there, I think it had actually been advertised somewhat earlier too on the radio that if you come to the fair, you'll see the amazing Tyson and prepare to be amazed and you won't believe your eyes, seeing is believing, all this stuff. When we got to the fair, there were posters all over the place and they were really cool. The posters were really cool. They had him kind of a shadowy looking figure in a dark suit. And then they had bright orange and hot yellow in the background. So it was building anticipation. It was like we looked at those and said, something that comes on at 2 o'clock. We should try to be back here to see it. So then we get there at 2 o'clock, and we're actually a little bit early. We got into our seats, sat down, and 2 o'clock comes. Well, 2:05 comes. He's not out there yet. About 10 minutes later, he doesn't come out. And finally, it was probably close to 15 minutes after 2 o'clock that all of a sudden lights go down, the psychedelic music starts playing, and the deep theatrical voice, "You will not believe your eyes. Prepare to be amazed." I don't remember if these were the exact words, but you get the idea. And then all of a sudden, put your hands together for the one and the only Tyson. And all of a sudden the lights came up and this man walked out on the stage and he was wearing plain street clothes. Okay. Now, what I didn't understand at the time, and I understand now after watching the video, is that this was all part of the act. Let me explain. First of all, you have the advertisements and the posters, and that's to create a sense of excitement. Because one of the things for a hypnotist to be successful, he needs to create a heightened level of emotion and awareness and alertness. So you get people excited. They see the posters. You're going to see something amazing. You don't want to miss this. Well, then you get there. You're sitting there in time, and he's running late. Well, 5 minutes late, that's enough time to let people get their seats, the few late comers. But about 10 minutes, people are starting to wonder what's going on. What he's actually doing is he's kind of trying to create a state of confusion to add to the excitement, because that increases the heightened emotional state. And the higher your emotional state is, the more susceptible you are to the power of suggestion. And that's what he wants. So then he comes out there and then the psychedelic music starts playing. And of course, the excitement and anticipation pops up. And then he comes out and he's just this ordinary looking guy. Very folksy, very friendly, funny, laughs. The type of guy you feel like you could just want to hang around out with in the afternoon. Well, then he did a few illusion tricks, and then he did a crowd exercise or so, and then he picked volunteers from the audience. Well, I realized after watching this video that his crowd exercises were what he used to help pick out his subjects that he was going to use. Okay, now what does this have to do with the COVID stuff? Well, here's one of the things. Whenever we basically last year we dealt with what they called was a state of a national emergency. Actually, it was a worldwide emergency. They called it. Now, anytime there is any type of emergency, whether it is national, state, or local, the one thing the civil authorities want to do is they want to make sure that people aren't panicking. They try to keep people calm. When in Florida, we had these pesky things called hurricanes, and every once in a while, actually where we were, we actually had 3 direct hits over a course of a few years. But one of the things the authorities do is they want to keep people calm. You don't want people panicking. Well, in this particular case, they did exactly the opposite. If you remember the shutdown, they told us if we don't shut down the country, 2.5 million people are going to die. So we have to shut down the country. Now, it was based on a model that was so ridiculously faulty that everybody knew it was faulty. They knew it was not an accurate model, but yet we fell for it. Well, see, the thing is, this has all happened earlier. This all was laid. The groundwork was actually laid much earlier. Back in January, all of a sudden, we started hearing of a place that most of us had never heard of, Wuhan, China. Most of us had never heard of that, and we started seeing the images of people dying. And that there was some mysterious illness happening over there, and people were getting extremely sick and dying from it. And then as the time progressed, it's now spreading over other parts of China, and then into other parts of Asia, and then into Europe. And of course, the anticipation is coming, is it going to make it to the United States? And see, what is happening now is we're coming into a higher state of emotion and alertness, and the emotion that they're playing on is fear. What's going to happen in this mysterious illness? Is it really, what is it? And then, of course, then finally there was that fateful day when they announced that there had been a confirmed case here in the United States. All of this is building up. Now, somewhere in here they did something rather interesting. They started talking about where it came from. Now, this is something that Mr. Holliday covered in his video. Because the choices we were given was, did it come from a bat that somehow transmitted the disease to humans in the fresh markets in the Wuhan district, or was it a creation in a laboratory? So now you've got like I say, you're given a choice here to try to decide which was it, where did it come from? Well, in order for you to really argue that choice, you have to accept that the virus is something completely different. So there's no third choice. Now, somewhere in this particular time, you may have remembered the frontline doctors who were basically saying this is the absolute wrong thing should be done. One of these frontline doctors was a man named Dr. Dan Erickson, and he interviewed epidemiologist Dr. Knut Witowski. And one of the questions that he asked him was, is there a difference between COVID-19 and the flu? His answer was fundamentally no, there's no difference. There's superficial differences, symptoms vary somewhat, but basically it is a flu virus. Well, that wasn't one of the choices. The choices we were given that it was something that had been transmitted to us by bats, or it was a creation in a laboratory. Now see, in order to do that, you have to accept that the virus is something completely different. Now, one thing that has happened is that the charge was made that this virus was never actually isolated. Many doctors and medical professionals made that charge. That charge has never actually been answered. The response to that charge was either we know videos were censored, taken down off of YouTube, Facebook. Big tech was basically censoring these things. And then the effort was made to discredit the people who were making the charges. Now, anytime you see somebody discrediting somebody who's making a charge, it actually means they don't have an argument against it, because the logical thing to do would be to demonstrate, no, this is an actual separate virus. Here's why we know it's totally different. This is what the flu looks like. This is what COVID-19 looks like. Okay, so then the thing is during that period of time, and I actually don't have it with me, but they started telling us you need to get tested if you have these symptoms. So they started listing off the symptoms of COVID-19, that if you have these symptoms, you may have COVID-19. There were things like high fever and chills, cough, loss of taste and smell, gastrointestinal issues, runny nose, congestion in your head. Well, these are all symptoms of the common cold. I've had common colds. I've had colds before. I'm not totally sure if I've ever had the flu, but I've had every one of those symptoms. And I'm going to come back to some of that here. But they never answered the charge whether or not this thing was really just another strain of the flu that came around that they capitalized on. But see, the thing is by now they've gotten people so into a heightened state of emotion and alertness that when they announced that we need to do the shutdown, people just simply complied to it. And really, you look at some of the things that people were told to do, they make absolutely no sense. There was never any evidence that wearing a mask actually did anything to slow down the spread of a virus. But they started doing things that made no sense, like well, you need to wear a mask to protect yourself. Well, I'd rather take my chances. So then they started this idea that, well, you wear a mask so you protect other people, and their mask is protecting you. There was never any evidence for that. Now, in a case of a surgical mask, yeah, the surgeon's wearing the mask to protect the patient, but what he's protecting them from is saliva falling into an open wound. So, but it does nothing to, it's not to protect them from a virus. It simply wouldn't do anything. But we saw people doing things, people were made to do things that were absolutely ridiculous. You remember, uh, we've all seen these people driving down the street in their car all by themselves wearing a mask. Even I thought more ridiculous than that. My wife and I were hiking up in the Smokies, about 5,000 feet up, cleanest air you can find in anywhere in Tennessee, and people are wearing masks while they're hiking. I mean, it absolutely made no sense whatsoever. So then the thing is, now I want to go back to something, because one of the symptoms that they talked about, I want to go back to one of the things we saw in the show that Tyson did. One of the things he got people to do was he got people to believe that he was invisible. And he said, when I snap my fingers, you're going to wake up and I'm going to be completely invisible. And he did all kinds of things among the people, and the people were just acting like, what's going on? But one of the things he did is, while they were all sitting down, he went up behind this young lady, crouched down to about waist level, and blew a really long, loud, nasty sounding raspberry. And she had this look on her face like, oh, I can't stop it. She actually genuinely believed she had just farted. And, of course, it was hilarious and spooky at the same time to watch that. But the people around her started scooting their chairs away from her. And after he brought them back around to ask them, what had gone on and stuff, the people around her could actually describe the odor. I mean, literally, one guy was saying, oh, it was like rancid feta cheese and garlic. Now, we in the audience all knew nothing had happened. It was just a noise. But he actually could describe the smell. Now, one of the things that started happening, I think it was either late last year or early this year, is they started talking about one of the hallmark symptoms of COVID-19 is loss of taste and smell. And I remember when they first talked about it, that threw up a red flag for me, because it's like, well, when I got a cold or got the flu, nothing tastes good. And particularly if it's a head cold, I can't smell anything. I mean, you could blow a skunk up next to me and I wouldn't know it. Now, the truth of the matter is, as I've gotten older, and probably 30 plus years of working in the cabinet business, my sense of smell isn't that strong in the first place. But the thing is now what you've done is you've planted an idea and people are already in a heightened state of emotion. And then they start saying, you lose your sense of taste and smell. Well, they never realize that, wait a minute, I lose my sense of taste and smell every time I've got a cold. But now it's really, really heightened. Now, the truth is, matters, viruses, flu viruses and cold viruses, we all know they're a little bit different. Every time the cold comes around, the symptoms are a little different. Sometimes you get one and it really settles in the GI tract. Another time it might really just give you a really bad headache, and another time it'll really be deep in the chest. I remember some years ago, an odd one was that, and it seemed like most people tended to get this kind of symptom, is that you'd feel sick for a few days, really, really bad, have a running the fever, and then you'd be better, but the cough would last for 6 weeks. It's just one of those weird things, and it just took forever to get the cough to go away. They're not all like that. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Some of them are going to affect your sense of taste and smell more than others. But the thing is, also keep in mind, is as we get older, we tend to, our sense of taste and smell change anyway. But they planted this idea, they made this suggestion, you're already in a heightened sense of emotion and alert, and your mind goes with it. Now, it sounds like I'm saying that, oh, it's all in your head. No, everything is all in your head. The truth of the matter is, your 5 senses have to be interpreted by your brain. So whatever information your eye takes in doesn't mean anything until the brain takes that information and processes it. And it's just like the hypnotist could give the suggestion to people who are in a high state of emotion and alertness. He could tell them, your brain is not going to process the information when the information comes in that I'm standing in front of him. Your brain is not going to process. I'm going to be invisible. And people literally could not see him. And they couldn't see him. And, he then set the stage where, the woman had passed gas and people could actually smell it. I mean, the thing was, there wasn't anything there, but the signal had been there. Now, the interesting thing about the man who described it as feta cheese and rancid garlic or rancid feta cheese, we both noticed that he looks like he's Italian. So maybe he eats a lot of Italian food, and that's the first thing that came to his mind. Okay, so the thing is we're all experiencing a bit of a frustration here, because you can talk to people, you can show them the facts, and it just doesn't seem to mean anything. Well, part of the thing is, the reason for that is because people have been kind of lulled into a trance. And I think it actually even goes back further than what the Wuhan news from back in January, and kind of in the build-up there. I think it goes back to the advent of the 24/7 news cycle. People are just mesmerized by it. I almost never watch the news. I've saw it a week or two ago. We were up in Ohio visiting some people, and they had the news channels on Sunday morning, and I think it was Face the Nation. The first 15 minutes was about COVID, or actually this Delta variant. Now, keep in mind, if they've never actually isolated the virus, how do they know that there is actually a Delta variant, so to speak? And that one there's never been any actual evidence that they've actually isolated that one. So here we are. So basically, like I said, I never watch the news. I know that Governor Cuomo resigned the other day due to allegations of sexual misconduct. That took 10 seconds to say that. That's all I need to know. Truth of the matter is, that's all you need to know. That's all anybody actually does know. We don't know what actually happened. I mean, we don't need 3 hours of different news magazine shows opining over what is going to happen next, what's going on. So that's part of it too, I think. So what can be actually done about it? Well, one of the things in this case of any hypnotist, whether it's a stage hypnotist or a therapeutic hypnotist, there has to be a signal to get people out of the trance. Now, in this particular case, there is no signal to get people out of the trance. And the reason that you find people, you come in there and you try to talk to people and explain to them this is what's going on, it's like they look at you as if you've got two heads. It's just not even registering. And the reason for that is because they've been brought into that trance. Now, it's very easy for us to get angry because, first of all, it's easy to get angry at what our government and leaders are doing to us, but it's also angry because, can't you see this? Are you really that gullible that you're actually believing this? Well, now the problem is we're angry. Well, anger is also a heightened state of emotion, which means we're also kind of in a bit of a trance ourselves, and we're seeing everything through that lens. And when we react in anger, we're just exacerbating the situation. So what is the solution? Well, what happens first of all, understanding what happens when people don't get brought out of the trance, if they're just left there. Well, eventually 99% of the time, they would eventually just wake up and come out of it. So if they were to suddenly stop talking about COVID and go on to something else, eventually people would just forget about it and move on. But the thing is they're keeping the trance alive, because every time you turn the news on, it's about the Delta variant. And you see the signals all around you, wear a mask, get vaccinated. You can't escape it. So the solution, the only best thing that we can do is to stay very, very calm. Project an image of courage and confidence. We're not afraid. And above all, do not wear a mask. Remember, the mask is the visual image of COVID. You can't see the virus. They've generated a computer-generated image of a virus. You see that once in a while, but every time you see people walking around with masks, it may as well have one word written on it: COVID-19. It's a reminder of the mask. It's simply, you wearing a mask simply reinforces the fear that they are living under. Don't wear it. You're not being kind to them by wearing it. You're not being understanding. Don't wear the mask, but don't get in people's faces. Be calm about it. So that's all I've got to say. I'm going to link the original video in the comments, and you can watch it. Like I said, it's very, very interesting, but it is a little bit hard to follow. And like I said, 45 minutes is a little bit long. Unfortunately, I was hoping to keep this under 15 minutes. I see I'm pushing close to 20. So God bless you all. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon.